We're delighted that, and I'm sure viewers are, that we have with us the unconventional economist from macrobusiness.com, Leith Van Onselen. Welcome.
G'day, David. Thanks for having me on again.
Good, and you're what they say is ubiquitous, and that's very good because your advice is so excellent. Leith, it seems as though the economy, at least in the key areas of the private sector, is not growing.
Yeah, it's not too good, David. So on Wednesday, the Australian Bureau of Statistics released the national accounts for the second quarter, and that's what gives you all your GDP results and all those sorts of things. And as it turns out, Australia's economy overall grew by 0.2% in the June quarter and 1% over the year. Now, that's growth, but that was actually the slowest annual rate of growth outside of the pandemic since December 1991. So 33 years ago, during the early 90s recession that we had to have. And when you actually break it down, it was actually a lot worse than that, David, because the population grew by about 2.4%. And is that Australia's GDP fell by 0.4% over the quarter, and it's actually fallen for the last 6 quarters straight, or 7 out of the last 8 quarters, and it's now 2% lower than it was when the Albanese government came into office in June 2022. So what that effectively means is that although the overall economy has grown, everyone's slice of the economic pie has shrunk by 2% over the last 2 years, which is obviously not a good result. And actually, if you break down the internals of the growth, it's even worse, David, because the area that you and I and all the viewers who are watching this care about the most is the household sector. So the economy is basically broken up into 3 sectors. It's broken up in the household sector, which is the largest. Then there's the business sector, and then there's the government sector. And the area that we all care about is the household sector, and the results there were absolutely deplorable. So household consumption per capita, so that's our spending, is now contracted for 6 straight quarters, and it's down 2.4% over that period. So we're all spending less, obviously. But the worst one is that our incomes, so this is real per capita household income, so income once you adjust for inflation and population growth, is actually down by around 8% over 2 years. And that's one of the biggest declines in the world. So although the economy is growing slightly, it's growing through population growth, the household sector is getting smashed. And the only area of the economy that is growing at the moment, David, is actually the government sector. So that's through government spending. So we've basically got 2 economies at the moment. The public sector grew by 1.5% in the June quarter, whereas the private sector actually fell by 0.6%. So we've got a growing public sector and a shrinking private sector. And public sector spending is now at a record level as a share of GDP. It's never been higher. And the public sector accounted for 0.4% of Australia's growth of 0.2%, which means the private sector went backwards by about 0.2%. So it's a pretty nasty set of numbers there. We're experiencing the longest per capita recession in modern history, dating back to records from the early 1970s. It's not the deepest, but it's the longest. And we're also dealing with the largest decline in real per capita household disposable income in records dating back to pretty much the 1960s. And it's one of the biggest in the world. So it's a very nasty economic situation at the moment.